Have you ever wondered what $96 million of family betrayal feels like? I'm Noelle Quincy. And tonight at the inheritance dinner everyone had been waiting for, my father finally said the words out loud. He raised his glass and smiled at my little brother who'd been home exactly 4 weeks. Everything, the company, the houses, the accounts, $96 million in total now belongs to Ben. My mother nodded proudly. He deserves it more than you ever did. The room clapped. I stood up slowly, walked to the head of the table, and placed 4 things right in front of my father. The old medical and financial power of attorney he and Mom had signed years ago when they couldn't even hold a pen. The house keys, the safe keys, and 1 thick envelope sealed with red notary wax. I looked straight at Ben. Congratulations. Then, I turned and headed for the door. Dad laughed under his breath, probably thinking it was some dramatic goodbye note. He ripped the envelope open right there in front of 20 relatives and his oldest friends. His eyes scanned the first line, the second. The glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the hardwood floor. "You've got to be kidding me," he roared, slamming the table so hard the plates jumped. "This is insane," Mom screamed. Ben froze. Every head turned to me, still walking away. If you've ever been told you're worth nothing after giving everything, drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. Because what happens next is exactly why you never underestimate the quiet one. Keep watching. 5 years ago, I was living the dream in Seattle, senior software engineer at a health tech unicorn, pulling in just under $300,000 a year. Leading a 12-person AI team that was about to close Series C, my calendar was packed with investor dinners and keynote invites. Then one Tuesday morning, my phone rang at 5:47 a.m. Pacific Time. It was the charge nurse at Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. Dad had collapsed at the office, massive stroke. They were wheeling him into emergency surgery. By the time I landed at MSP 4 hours later, he was already in a medically induced coma with machines breathing for him. 2 days after that, Mom went in for what she thought was bronchitis, stage 3 lung cancer. Chemo started the following Monday. She lost 32 pounds in 6 weeks and could barely lift a coffee cup. I took indefinite unpaid leave the same week, packed 2 suitcases, sublet my Capitol Hill apartment, and moved back into my childhood bedroom in Edina. The company in Seattle said, "Take all the time you need." They replaced me in 9 days. The first year blurred into a loop of bright hospital lights and antiseptic smell. I slept on the vinyl recliner in Dad's ICU room more than 300 nights. I learned how to suction his trach when the night nurse was busy. I learned how to mix Mom's chemo at home once she was discharged because the home health agency was short-staffed. I could start in 4 in the dark by month 8. Dad finally woke up after 6 weeks in a coma, but the stroke stole his speech for 8 solid months. He could nod, squeeze my hand twice for yes, once for no. Mom's hands shook so badly she couldn't sign her own name. The hospital social worker sat me down with their estate attorney. Minnesota law is clear. If both parents can't take care of themselves, someone has to hold medical and financial power of attorney or the state steps in. They both signed the documents on the same afternoon. Shaky X's witnessed by 2 nurses and a notary who came to the neuro floor. That signature made me acting CEO of Quincy Medical Supply overnight, 0 paycheck attached. I was 30 then, running a 90-person company that made ventilators and portable X-ray machines while pushing Mom's wheelchair to radiation every morning. I taught myself corporate finance from YouTube and SEC filings at 2 in the morning after the night nurse left, signed vendor contracts, approved payroll, negotiated with insurance giants. All while Dad watched me from his hospital bed with eyes that said he was sorry he couldn't speak yet. Meanwhile, my little brother Ben had vanished off the face of the earth. Last anyone heard, he was in Phoenix, deep into opioids after a back injury from a construction job. He got arrested for possession with intent 18 months before Dad's stroke. Arizona court gave him a choice: 12-month mandatory residential rehab or prison. He picked rehab. The program had a no-contact policy with family for the first 6 months. Then he just never called again. Mom kept his bedroom exactly the same, like he was away at college instead of ghosting us. I didn't have time to chase him. Every dollar the company earned kept the lights on at the factory and paid for Mom's experimental immunotherapy that insurance denied twice. I fought those denials myself, wrote the appeals, flew to Chicago to meet medical directors. Dad started speech therapy and could finally whisper thank you around month 14. Mom's scans showed shrinkage for the first time. I let myself believe we were turning the corner. I was wrong, but that corner was still 3.5 years away. The morning the doorbell rang at 7 sharp, I was elbow deep in payroll reports and hadn't slept in 31 hours. I opened the door, still holding a cold mug of coffee, and found Ben standing on the porch with nothing but a faded army duffel. He looked different, thinner, clean-shaven, eyes clear for the first time since he was 17. I finished the program, he said. 14 months clean. Court-ordered rehab in Arizona. They let me out 3 weeks ago. Mom came running from the kitchen in her robe, took one look at him, and collapsed into his arms, sobbing like he'd come back from war. Within an hour, she had called every relative within 100 miles. By noon, the house smelled like cinnamon rolls and second chances. That same afternoon, the rewriting began. Mom sat Dad down in his recliner and told him loud enough for me to hear from the hallway that Ben had simply been finding himself out west, that he'd been networking with suppliers in Phoenix, that he'd enrolled in online business courses. Every ugly truth got sanded off and replaced with a shiny new story. By dinner, the official family line was set. Ben had never been an addict. He'd been an entrepreneur in training. The next day, he walked into the company like he'd never left. Mom marched him straight to the executive floor and introduced him to the leadership team as the future of Quincy Medical Supply. The coup, a guy named Mark who owed his job to me keeping the lights on for half a decade, shook Ben's hand like he was royalty and asked if he wanted the corner office repainted. 3 days later, my login stopped working. I called IT. They said the Q had ordered a full password reset for security reasons. Translation: my access was gone. Board meeting invites quit showing up in my inbox. When I asked Dad about it, he just shrugged and said, Mom thought it was time Ben took the reins. I kept showing up anyway, slipped in through the factory entrance. Before dawn, worked from an empty cubicle on the 3rd floor nobody used anymore. Approved purchase orders that somehow never got countersigned. Fixed pricing errors that would have cost us 6 figures, sent emails that went unanswered. At night, I drove home, microwaved leftover lasagna, and coded on my laptop until the sun came up again, building something nobody in that house knew existed yet. Ben started holding daily stand-ups in the conference room one used to run. He wore crisp shirts Mom ironed for him and repeated buzzwords he'd picked up somewhere: synergy, vertical integration, disruptive growth. Employees who once brought me coffee now brought him. The ones who still nodded at me in the hallway did it fast, eyes down, like acknowledging me might get them in trouble. Mom redecorated his old bedroom the first weekend. New mattress, new desk, framed photos from when he was quarterback in high school. She hung a sign on the door that said, Ben, future CEO. When I walked past it, I felt the walls close in a little tighter. Dad's speech had improved enough to manage short sentences. He started asking Ben's opinion on everything inventory. Levels, new product lines, whether we should bid on the Coleman regional contract. Every time I tried to speak up, Mom cut me off with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Let your brother handle it, honey. You've done enough. I stopped arguing, just nodded, went back to my shadow workstation, and kept the company breathing while they planned a victory parade for a ghost who'd been gone the entire war. The night the chandelier lit up the dining room like a showroom. 22 place settings waited under white linen. Silver clinked against crystal, while the caterers poured the second round of champagne. Everyone who mattered in our little Minnesota empire was there, uncles who still sat on the board, cousins who owned dealerships, Dad's oldest golf buddies, even the family minister. Dad stood at the head of the table in a midnight blue suit Mom had picked out that morning. His voice had gotten stronger in the last year. He didn't need the microphone someone had set up just in case. Tonight isn't just dinner, he began, lifting his glass higher. Tonight we pass the torch to the next generation, to the person who has proven he belongs at the helm. He turned and placed a hand on Ben's shoulder. My brother wore the same proud grin he'd been practicing in the mirror for weeks. Last week, I signed the final documents, Dad continued. $96 million in company equity, the real estate holdings. The investment accounts, everything now belongs to Benjamin. A ripple of applause rolled around the table. Someone whistled. Aunt Linda dabbed her eyes with a monogrammed napkin. Mom reached over and squeezed Ben's hand so hard her knuckles went white. She looked straight at me across the rosemary-crusted lamb and smiled the sweetest, cruelest smile I'd ever seen. He deserves it far more than you ever did, Noelle. The words landed clean and sharp. A few cousins shifted in their seats, unsure where to look. Uncle Ray tried to start another round of clapping, but it died fast. I pushed my chair back and stood. The room quieted the way it does when people smell blood in the water. I walked the length of the table, heels silent on the Persian rug, and stopped right beside Dad. Then I laid 4 things down in the exact center of the white tablecloth, one by one. First, the original medical and financial power of attorney, creased from years in my safe. Second, the house keys on the old brass ring Dad gave me the day I moved back. Third, the single key to the gun safe and document vault in his study. Fourth, one thick manila envelope sealed in red notary wax, my initials embossed across the flap. Every eye followed my hands. The chandelier made the wax gleam like fresh blood. I met Ben's stare, calm and steady. "Congratulations," I said, voice soft enough that only the people closest heard it clearly. Then I turned and started walking toward the archway that led to the foyer. Dad let out a short, dismissive laugh, the same one he used when I was 12, and begged to tag along on fishing trips. He thought he knew what was inside: a resignation letter, a tear-stained apology, a last desperate plea. He picked up the envelope, slid his butter knife under the seal, and ripped it open right there between the creme brulee and the port. The first page slid out. His eyes scanned the header, then the second line, then the third. The butter knife clattered against porcelain. His face drained of color so fast I saw it from 20 feet away. He looked up at me, mouth working but no sound coming out, and finally roared loud enough to rattle the crystal. "You've got to be kidding me." Mom half rose from her chair. "Richard, what is it?" He couldn't answer. He just kept staring at the papers, shaking in his hand like they were written in fire. Dad's roar still echoed off the crown molding when he finally found his voice again. He held the pages up like they were contagious, reading aloud in a voice that cracked between fury and disbelief. 18 months ago, while I was still in a coma and Mom was barely conscious from chemotherapy, Noelle Quincy, acting under valid Minnesota medical and durable financial power of attorney, transferred 98% of all Class A voting shares of Quincy Medical Supply into the Quincy Health Foundation Irrevocable Trust. He stopped, swallowed hard, and kept going. With Lauren Brooks, licensed Minnesota estate planning attorney, appointed sole trustee. The trust is irrevocable under Minnesota statutes. Section 501. C. This instrument dated and notarized at Mayo Clinic, Rochester. Effective tonight, upon formal notification to all financial institutions. The freeze clause activates. No transfer, sale, pledge, or distribution involving prior shareholders may occur without trustee consent. Any attempt to revoke or amend is void. The words hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. Uncle Ray's mouth actually fell open. Aunt Linda's champagne flute slipped and shattered on the hardwood. Nobody moved to clean it. Dad's hand shook so badly the papers rattled. This can't be legal. He rasped. Gregory Hayes, Dad's college roommate, board member for 35 years. And the man who still controlled the company's main banking relationship, felt his phone buzz against his chest. He pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and went the color of printer paper. "Richard," he said quietly, holding the phone so everyone could see the U.S. bank alert. "All operating accounts, line of credit, merchant services, everything is frozen. As of midnight tonight." They're citing the trust notification that just hit their legal department. Mom made a sound like a wounded animal and slid sideways out of her chair. 2 cousins caught her before she hit the floor. Ben shot to his feet, face twisted toward me where I still stood near the archway. "What the hell did you do?" he screamed, veins standing out in his neck. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The documents were doing it for me. Dad kept flipping pages, voice rising with every paragraph. Contingent beneficiary upon trustee discretion, Quincy Health Systems LLC, a Minnesota entity formed 3 years ago for the purpose of... He looked up, eyes wild. "You built another company? With whose money?" He didn't wait for an answer. He already knew whose sleepless nights had paid for it. Gregory tried again, softer. "Rich, I just got off with our relationship manager. The freeze is ironclad. They won't even let us make tomorrow's payroll without trustee approval. We're locked out." Someone's wife started crying quietly into her napkin. The minister stared at his plate like he'd never seen salmon before. Ben lunged across the table, knocking over water glasses, grabbing for the papers. Dad yanked them away, clutching them to his chest as if letting go would make them disappear. "You think you can steal my company?" Dad shouted at me. "After everything we gave you?" I finally spoke, calm and flat. "You signed the power of attorney yourself. Mom signed it the same day. Both of you were clear-minded enough to know exactly what it said. Minnesota doesn't let you take it back just because you changed your mind later." Mom, still half on the floor, whimpered. "We thought you were helping us, not robbing us." I looked at her for a long second. "I was helping you survive. You just forgot to notice who kept you alive." Ben slammed both palms on the table. "We'll sue. We'll fight this." Lauren Brooks's name was on every page along with the seal of the Minnesota Secretary of State. Irrevocable meant irrevocable. Every attorney in the room knew it. Gregory just shook his head slowly. Dad sank back into his chair like someone had cut his strings. The papers slipped from his fingers and scattered across the tablecloth. One sheet landed in the melted butter. The chandelier kept shining, bright and merciless, on 22 people who suddenly realized the empire they'd come to celebrate no longer belonged to any of them. Phones started exploding before the caterers even cleared the dessert plates. Gregory's screen lit up first with another bank alert, then Dad's, then every board member who still had the company app on their phone. The same red banner on every device: access revoked. Trust freeze in effect. Aunt Linda grabbed her coat and muttered something about an early morning. Uncle Ray followed without finishing his port. Within minutes, the driveway filled with reversing tail lights. Nobody said goodbye. By the time the last guest pulled away, the official email from Coleman Regional Health Network hit the executive distribution list. Subject line: selection of vendor for enterprise-wide operating system. I had already seen it an hour earlier. Coleman 18 hospitals across Minnesota and western Wisconsin. $62 million contract everyone thought was in the bag had chosen Quincy Health Systems, my company. The one I'd registered in a tiny WeWork in downtown Minneapolis 3 years ago. Coding after midnight while the factory floor downstairs still stamped out ventilators under the old name. The email was short and brutally polite. After exhaustive evaluation, Coleman Regional Health Network is proud to announce our partnership with Quincy Health Systems, LLC for full AI-driven patient flow, supply chain, and revenue cycle management. Implementation begins Q1. Dad read it aloud in the now empty dining room, voice hollow. Ben snatched the phone, scrolled, then hurled it against the stone fireplace. Glass and lithium batteries scattered across the hearth. At 8:17 the next morning, the entire staff of Quincy Medical Supply received the same mass text from HR. Due to unforeseen banking restrictions, payroll processing for the current period has been suspended. Further updates to follow. By 9, the factory WhatsApp groups were on fire. Forklift drivers posted photos of the gates chained shut by the bank's repo team. The head of accounting live-streamed herself crying in the parking lot because her direct deposit alert bounced. The family's longtime attorney, Tom Erickson, finally returned Dad's 19th call. I could hear every word through the study door. "Richard, I'm sorry. Conflict of interest. Lauren Brooks is on retainer with the trust now. I can't represent you against it. You need new counsel." Click. Ben disappeared upstairs. 10 minutes later, the sound of splintering wood and shattering glass rained down from the second floor. Mom ran up screaming his name. Something heavy hit the hallway runner. Later, we found it was the mahogany dresser she'd bought him for graduation. Dad sat on the bottom step, head in his hands, staring at the scattered trust pages like they were written in another language. He kept muttering numbers: 96 million, 62 million, the mortgage balance, Mom's medical bills that were still coming due. I stood in the kitchen drinking coffee I didn't taste and watched the empire finish bleeding out in real time. By noon, the Star Tribune had the story on their website. Someone at Coleman leaked the vendor announcement. Someone at the bank leaked the freeze. The headline was merciless: Minneapolis medical supply giant locked out overnight. New AI startup takes crowning contract. My phone buzzed with a different kind of notification. Series B term sheet from a Silicon Valley fund I'd been talking to quietly for 6 months. They'd just increased their valuation after seeing the Coleman win. I accepted the congratulations with a thumbs up emoji and turned the screen off. Upstairs, Ben had punched through drywall and was now sobbing on the landing. Mom tried to hold him the way she did when he was 9 and broke his arm at hockey practice. He shoved her away hard enough that she stumbled backward into the banister. Dad didn't move to help. He just kept staring at the same paragraph in the trust document, the one that said in plain English that not a single share could ever come back. Minnesota law, ironclad, final. The house went quiet except for the occasional crash in Mom's broken please. I set my empty mug in the sink, picked up the small overnight bag I'd packed 2 days earlier, and walked out the front door without a word. The cold November air tasted like freedom. 9 months later, the for sale sign in front of the Adina house was sun-bleached and leaning. The old Quincy Medical Supply sign on County Road 18 had been gone since spring, replaced by a generic banner that read, "Auction. Everything must go." Chapter 11 lasted exactly 11 weeks. Creditors smelled blood the moment the bank statements hit the docket. The judge converted it to Chapter 7 liquidation faster than anyone expected. By June, the factory machines were sold off in lots to a distributor out of Chicago. The office furniture went to a startup incubator for pennies on the dollar. The company that once employed 90 people in the northwest suburbs simply ceased to exist. The house followed 5 months after the first missed mortgage payment. The mortgage was in Mom and Dad's names only. The trust never touched real estate. U.S. Bank filed foreclosure in Hennepin County District Court and won by default. The sheriff's sale happened on a Tuesday morning in August. A young couple from Eden Prairie bought it for 62 cents on the dollar. They posted the closing photos on Instagram the same week: new quartz counters, fresh paint. No trace of the family that had lived there for 27 years. Ben lasted 73 days. On the outside, he tested positive for fentanyl the first time he tried to visit Mom after the eviction notice. 2 weeks later, Minneapolis PD picked him up asleep in a stolen Civic with a backpack full of pills. The public defender negotiated a plea 18 months at MCF Lino Lakes with mandatory chemical dependency treatment. Mom cried when they took him away in cuffs. Dad didn't go to the courthouse. They moved into a 1-bedroom unit above a laundromat. In St. Louis Park, 2nd floor, south-facing, $1,180 a month including heat. Dad's Social Security and early retirement pension came to $2,416 combined. Mom's Medicare Advantage covered most of her maintenance chemo, but the copays still ate half of every check. They bought groceries with SNAP benefits and kept the thermostat at 62. Every lawsuit died the same way. They filed 3 in total: 1 in state court, claiming undue influence, 1 in federal court alleging breach of fiduciary duty, and 1 emergency motion to unwind the trust. Every judge cited the same thing. The medical and financial powers of attorney were executed when both grantors still had legal capacity, witnessed by Mayo Clinic staff, notarized and recorded. Minnesota does not recognize regret as grounds for revocation. Case dismissed with prejudice. Attorney fees on the plaintiff. Dad aged 10 years and 9 months. His hair went completely white. He stopped playing golf. Stopped answering the phone when old friends called to check in. Some mornings he sat on the tiny balcony in his robe and stared at the parking lot until the sun went down. Mom tried once to reach me. She created a new Gmail address and sent a single message from the public library. "We're sorry. Please come see us. We have nothing left." I never replied. The email went to an inbox I closed the same week. The last time I drove past the old house, the new owners had put up Halloween decorations, glowing skeletons on the lawn, orange lights in the trees that used to be mine. The porch where Ben and I learned to ride bikes now held a welcome mat that said, "Home Sweet Home" in cheerful block letters. I kept driving. Today I stand on the 42nd floor of the Capella Tower in downtown Minneapolis and watch the light bounce off Lake Calhoun the way it did when I was a kid riding my bike around it every summer. The glass wall in front of me carries the new logo. Quincy Health Systems, NASDAQ ticker QHS. We rang the bell 4 months ago. Opening price put the company at $1.9 billion. The stock has more than doubled since. My office takes up half the floor-to-ceiling windows, white oak, a single orchid on the credenza. No photos on the walls. No family pictures. Nothing. That reminds me of Adina, of hospital recliners, of the smell of antiseptic and betrayal. I changed every number the week I walked out. New phone, new email, new accounts. I blocked every cousin, every high school friend who still had mom's landline memorized. My assistant screens everything. Not one message has made it through. Some nights I pull up the old house on Zillow out of habit. The listing photos cycle. Every few months. New furniture, new paint, new people smiling in rooms that used to be mine. The algorithm thinks I'm interested in real estate. It doesn't know I'm just checking that the past is still gone. I never went back. Not for Christmas, not for Dad's birthday. Not when Ben overdosed the second time and the social worker called. From Hennepin County Medical Center looking for next of kin. I let it ring until voicemail gave up. People ask if I feel guilty. Reporters mostly. They want tears or at least a dramatic pause. They want the prodigal daughter who built an empire on revenge and now wrestles with regret. I don't. I don't feel triumph either. Revenge tastes like ash after the first bite. What I feel is quiet. The kind of quiet you only get when the noise finally stops screaming in your head. I kept the company alive when no one else would. I turned 5 years of sleepless nights into software that now predicts patient readmissions with 94% accuracy across 18 hospital systems. I created 380 good jobs in a city that watched the old factory gates rust shut. I funded 2 free clinics in North Minneapolis that carry my mother's maiden name, not because I wanted her gratitude, but because I could. That's the part strangers never understand. This wasn't about taking something away. It was about refusing to let everything I sacrificed become someone else's unearned trophy. I still sign documents Noel Quincy because the SEC requires it, but the name feels like a borrowed coat. I haven't said it out loud to another human being in over a year. When people ask what the Q stands for, I tell them it stands for quiet. Some lessons are expensive, but they're still lessons. Never give more than you can afford to lose. Never mistake tolerance for forgiveness. Never assume the people who need you today will remember you tomorrow. And if the day ever comes when they try to hand your life's work to someone who wasn't there when it was bleeding, remember that the law can be a weapon too, if you're willing to wield it while everyone else is busy clapping. I don't forgive. I don't look back. And I no longer carry their name in my future.